Audio. There we go. I think you should be able to hear me now. Uh, Apparently my dog has a lot of pent up energy tonight. Okay, so goal tonight is just to go over some of the basics of ForeFlight. I'll do a brief overview of the different settings and what they do, and then we'll go over some ForeFlight planning. This app can do a whole lot. And the way I do it, there's 50 different ways to input data, so a lot of it's going to come from personal preference down the road. I'll try to show as many different options as I can as we go over things tonight. If you have any questions, just pop them up in the chat, and we'll see if we can get you figured out. Hopefully, some of you have ForeFlight active, so that way you'll be able to follow along on your own. ForeFlight is probably, has been around the longest. I feel like it's probably the most refined. One drawback to it is proprietary to iPads. You got to have an iPad to use it. And if you go to the ForeFlight website, they do give you some guidance on what iPad to buy. Currently, I'm using a iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil. You don't need an Apple Pencil with it, but I do find some of the note-taking options that it has are pretty tedious with just your fingers. So if I'm going to be taking notes, it's actually usually I'll just continue to use an e-board or something to take notes instead of having to find different pages and screens in ForeFlight while you're trying to fly. But it does have the option to do that, and it has the option to do different annotations. You can put notes on there that will be stored for looking at later. In the link in the comment section, I have a document link for a settings page that I put together. Dan, how you doing? I'll pop it up again in case it's disappeared. Yeah, the weather has been nice these last few days. Probably one of the great things about it is, at least when the weather's bad, we can say, well, I wouldn't have been flying anyway, right? So, Paula, how you doing? Joe, see you there. The document, you can hang on to for later. It just shows you the settings that I have. Again, some of this stuff is personal preference, but we'll go through some of the things. In your iPad itself, things that you want to turn off, I put the lock rotation on so that it doesn't move the app around while you're trying to use it. I turn off I time out the passcode thing to like 15 minutes. It's not usually a problem with the app running as long as the app continues to run. It's not going to lock the screen out, but if you turn the app off for a little while, to save battery or whatever it is you're trying to do, it is kind of tedious to have to unlock it every time. So, one thing to consider is just turning auto lock completely off so that when you open the app back up in flight, you can just go right to the app without having to type in or do a finger scan or whatever you got going on. Going through in the bottom right, you got the More button. So we'll tap that, and then in the, oh, hang on, let me pull up my screen there for you there. So again, in the bottom right, clicking the More button is going to pull up all your settings and things. And up in the upper left, it has the checklist thing, which I've played around with a little bit. I know some pilots that are using it. You can make your own checklists. They have pre-made checklists. You can edit them. It's pretty neat. I wish the only drawback to it is that you have to go to the settings thing, then click on the checklist, and then find the item that you want to use. Uh, and it will walk you through the checklist. The drawback is I feel like they should put a quick link button on the main screen if you want to go quickly to the checklist. But I think they just threw checklist on there. Checklist predated the ForeFlight app. It was one of the first aviation feature apps that they put out, and it was a separate app for a while. It never got much use, and so I think they had the code, so they threw it in here. But you can play around with that. A logbook, you can see that I haven't been very tedious on my logbooking with ForeFlight. I still stick to paper. Personally, I use a iPad Excel or an Excel spreadsheet for my logbook. But I do like the logbook. They've made it a part of all the price plans now. It gives you a good way to keep track of your currency, your flights. You can have instructor sign-offs and endorsements put in there. The only thing that I find a little tedious is linking any flight log tracks with the logbook entries. But it seems pretty functional for the most part. I have it set up here that any track data that it's stored, I can turn into a logbook entry. By just inputting all the user required data. One thing I wish they would do is, I don't know if anybody uses my flight book, but that's what I use for my flight tracking mostly. I mean, I use the iPad sometimes or ForeFlight sometimes, but I use my flight book. And one of the nice things about my flight book is, especially from a renter standpoint, is that you can put in, your tack time or Hobbs time at the beginning, click start, it will track your flight, and then put in your Hobbs and tack time at the end after you stop it, and it saves it all as one thing here. On this one, you can start a logbook entry and put in your Hobbs and tack time, or whatever it is you want to use, put your time out and your time off, but it doesn't automatically record the flight like my flight book does. I think that's what I would like to see. I think if they make that connection or correlation there, I'll use the logbook section more. But you can turn track logs into logbook entries, and that's probably that'd be the easiest way to do it after the flight. But you'd have to keep track of your Hobbs or tack time separately. The weight and balance is also now a part of all the pricing plans. If you guys need, I have the weight and balance numbers, and so if you have questions about what entries need to be put in there, I can give that to you. In fact, there's a button I can click. I can send you an email copy of the airplane, and you just open up the email, and it will pop the weight and balance data right into your ForeFlight app. So send me a email request offline and what airplane you want of the club aircraft, and I can send those documents to you. I do like the weight and balance feature. It's a great way to do our due diligence. It's one of the tasks that I find, if it's not easy and readily accessible, a lot of pilots are probably not doing a very good job of doing their uh, weight and balance calculations. But you can see here with a pilot and a 290-pound co-pilot, I would be out of center of gravity for that. So, it allows you to, get them to lose a little weight, like I probably need to do. Or, you can throw them in the back seat and see if that helps. So it allows you to graphically, see how everything is. There's a couple lines here that you see. The green line is takeoff, and then the white line, or the green box, excuse me, is your takeoff weight, and then the white box is your zero fuel weight. In some airplanes, as you burn fuel, the center of gravity typically moves forward, and that can actually cause the weight and balance to go out of the center of gravity range, which means that you'd have to cut your flight short, only allowed to burn a certain amount of fuel to allow you to stay within the weight and balance restrictions there. So it's a good way to see that. And once we popped in a flight, it would calculate how much fuel we would burn based on the data we put in there, and you'd see another box in there for our landing. So takeoff, landing, and zero fuel. So that's all pretty cool stuff. The aircraft data, the link that I popped up there in the chat, that I'll throw in there again. That's the document I put together, which again just shows all of my settings, as well as the settings that I put in for each of the different aircraft for the club. Let's see if I can. So here's what the document looks like. So for each of the, just shows the different plans. Zoom it out so you can see a little bit. But I'll give you a brief summation of the features that you're going to find on the different plans. I have the Pro Plus version, so the next version up. For most of your VFR flying, I think the basic flight one is probably all you're going to need. It's $99 a year, and it gives you all the flight planning, briefing, weather data, the VFR and IFR charts, taxi diagrams, airport data, logbook weight and balance checklist, and a printable nav log. To add to that with the Pro Plus is probably your option if you're going to be an IFR flying pilot, because you get the geo-reference IFR charts. Hazard advisor is a nice feature for VFR too. It kind of shows you where all the towers and things like that are. Terrain profile, I'll show you that. It gives you a profile view of your flight. One of the nice features about ForeFlight is that you can upload documents into the app that you can get to later. The drawback for the basic plan is that if for some reason you remove the app from the from your iPad and reinstall it, you lose all those documents. So with the Pro Plus plan, you get cloud storage of all your documents. So if you have to, reinstall your app onto another device, or whatever the case is, all the documents are going to pop back up into there. So that's pretty nice. Icing and turbulence layers and synthetic vision. You still get, if you're hooked up to a attitude heading reference system like a Stratus or like our Garmin 345 transponders, will give you pitch and bank information, and the synthetic vision just adds to that, terrain and obstacle data. That's $199 a year for the Pro Plus plan. For the Performance Plus, that's designed primarily for your commercial aircraft, your, fast movers, your jets, your whatnot. Probably the only feature that I can see that would be kind of nice to have for VFR is the airport 3D view. It kind of gives you you can preview your flight essentially, and before you go, so you know what you're looking for, keep you from landing at the wrong airport, I suppose. Again, over here, I just show you all the settings that I use. I've been turned to the dark side, so I use the dark mode settings for most everything. But you can have it, go from day or night. And I'm going to go through some of them. But anyway, this shows the settings that I have on there, and you can, maybe use those as your default settings or, however you want. On the aircraft, probably the biggest problems people have on the aircraft settings, I have kind of like my default glide ratio, what altitude I usually have as a default altitude, fuel burn rates and all that stuff here for the different aircraft in the club. But the other part of it is I put in there the settings that need to go into your international flight plan, as they're wanting us to switch to using international flight plans. So those are all the settings for the different equipment. One of the nice things, even though the international flight plan, certainly added some complexity versus the domestic flight plan with ForeFlight. Once you have that data in there, it's pretty seamless, and it does pretty much everything for you. So once you got the data in there, you're all set. I put in a base true airspeed. Probably the one thing that ForeFlight doesn't do that, another feature I would like to see would be a true airspeed calculator. They don't do that. So what I put in here is, the true airspeed for the default altitude that I put in. I'm going to show you how to quickly change that true airspeed if you find it to be something different. But that's a user number that is going to give you the best pre-flight planning data to make sure your time, speed, and distance calculations are going to be correct before you go. So you want to have a correct true airspeed in there. So I have that for all the aircraft there. And then the last sheet, we're going to be kind of going through tonight, but I give you a basic planning to-do list, to guide you through looking at a lot of the things that I do when I get my briefing. There's a little checkbox for all the different things that you need to be looking at for your ensure you got a good pre-flight briefing. That's all the items that a pre-flight briefer would give you if you were talking to them over a phone. And fuel management, you're going to see that ForeFlight does a lot of the fuel calculations for you. So, all the start, climb, en route, descent, so long as you have the performance numbers added in there, it's going to do those for you for the most part. The So this just, gives you a big number I like to add with my fuel, especially when we're dealing with GPS, is my cruise endurance time. What your cruise endurance is essentially how long you can stay in the air until you need to have an airport underneath you. So I like to have that calculated for the different airplanes. Then I just put a little graph down here at the bottom for figuring out or calculating your true airspeed. You got thing over here that you can use to get your pressure altitude. You got a thing to get your density altitude. And once you have your density altitude, you just scroll across until you hit your, uh, 120 calibrate airspeed, and go straight down, and that'll give you your true airspeed. There's an example there, just so you can see how I figure that out. So, that's available for going through as you go through later on. Going through some of the aircraft data. Let's do an overview of that. So, tail number, serial number, optional. Aircraft type, it has you can pick a drop-down list, and it'll find it for you. In fact, I think you can put in the serial number and actually figure it out based on the serial number if you know that, which you can get off of the weight and balance data that I have up on the website. You got your aircraft color. It gives you, all you got to do is plug in what colors. Usually start with the primary color of the airplane and then put the trim colors in order of precedence, and it will generate the code for you there. Home airport, unit speed, default, or the performance profile. So here, you can make as many performance profiles as you want. So I just pick some different performance profiles for different altitudes I might find myself at, different true airspeeds. So that way I can just pop those into the planner for my calculations. You can do it for different power settings, and you can name them whatever you want to, so you can go back and reference them later on. The Cherokees, I spend most of my time flying around here, so I just put 3,000 feet. If you were using it mostly for trips, you might pick 4,500, 5,500, whatever makes sense. Maximum ceiling, the airplane can go higher than 10,500 feet. I just put that down as a number that I really don't plan on going higher than. You got your fuel, start and taxi fuel. That's a derived number from, it's not in the old handbook for the airplane, but it's based on data from comparable engines and comparable aircraft. Again, you got your FAA equipment code for domestic flight plans. Generally, they want you using the international flight plans now, so those are all the codes for that. You can put down if you have any dinghies. I don't know. Life jackets. Anyway, so if you do one for 1 Delta Tango, you can hit copy, make another one, and do one for 55 Whiskey. So there's a lot of different options there. So it's different aircraft that I fly. The custom content, it has the ability to upload different document types like KML documents. Here's an example of one that I uploaded in there. Was all the, I had a file for all the obstacle data for the airport, so I can pop that up onto the map, and it will generate all those data points from that. So you can put custom content on there. All the different track logs from all the different flights that I tracked that on there. Passenger, that's a new app that you can use. It's a light app. It's so you can have your passengers download it onto their, if they got iPhones, they can download it onto there. And what that will allow then is, they'll be able to watch and track the flight in progress, getting data sent to it through the ForeFlight app to them. Devices, so you can add different devices here. This is also where if you're hooking it to X-Plane or Flight Simulator or whatever it is where you're going to find those connections. Now, one of the things big issue I had when I first connected to X-Plane is I went to the devices thing. It showed that it was connected to X-Plane, but I wasn't actually getting any data onto the iPad, and I found that there's still a button that you have to click to enable that. So even though it's connected, you still have to enable it, at least the first time that you use it. And yes, the passenger app is free to passengers to download on there. Downloads. So here's where you're going to pick all the different coverage areas that you want. Right now I have, all the settings there for the different, I didn't opt for any high altitude charts, any helicopter charts, but there's a list of the different documents I'm putting on there. So taxi diagrams, terminal procedures, all that good stuff there. High resolution base map, if you're limited on data storage, that's one of the ones that you can, get off of there, high resolution base map in the train. And then you can click all the different states that you want to do. Now right now I only have New York clicked on there. One of the things that it has the option to do, keep in mind, you can download the entire U.S., but when it comes time to update things, it's going to tie you up quite a bit. So I just download the states I'm going to be flying in. There's an option if you're taking a trip to have it pack for you, so it will look and see based on your flight planning if all the required charts are there, and it will download the charts for you and make sure that you have everything you need for whatever trip you're going on. But just keep in mind, the more states that you pick, the more time you're going to spend waiting on things to download and update. You get your account data. Jepson, they added the option to JEP charts. Honestly, JEP charts used to be the bee's knees back in the day. The government charts weren't that great for IFR charts, but the government kind of went and essentially copied the design of the Jepson charts, and I find them to be as good as the Jepson charts. So that's an extra subscription if you do desire the Jepson charts, but I personally haven't seen a need for them. A lot of commercial outfits, mandate that you have Jepson because that's what they use for their primary stuff. Anyway, getting down to the settings section here, this is where you would go through and put all those default settings that I listed in the document. A lot of the stuff, there are ability to change things through a drop down on the main map page, but these are all just kind of your default settings. You can have different settings for whether you're in light mode or dark mode. What you want to be light, what you want to be dark. By having it set to system, then that means that it's going to go to whatever your dark mode settings are for the device. So if your device is set up to run light mode during the day and then dark mode at night, it will switch that for you based on whatever your iPad settings are. Show weather first, I click that off. Usually I find that when I want to look up airport data, I want the actual airport data. There's another way to get weather information as the first thing you see without having that clicked. I don't bother with the past half translations, just stick to the current ones. airway decoding. What bends only does is, especially if you're using a Victor airway or something like that, if you don't have airway, or if you have some of these other settings in here, all waypoints, then it's going to pop up a waypoint for every waypoint listed on there. So I just have bends only, meaning that every time there's a course change along the Victor airway, it's going to label that waypoint for me. I don't need to see the rest of them. And if I wanted to see them, I can put them in there manually during the flight planning process. Auto center, I like to do track up and forward. That's going to turn the map in the direction of flight. Again, there's toggles to change that as you go along. Some people like their map to be north up all the time. Drives me nuts, but I guess if your head's wired that way, what can I say? But I like the track up forward. Forward means that it's going to put your airplane lower on the screen, so it's going to show more of what's ahead of you than what's behind you, rather than being centered. Extended center lines, I do like that setting. Shows you quickly, where your runway 10 and 28 ends of the runway are. Distance rings, I have them turned off here, but normally I would fly with them on. That was just to reduce clutter for what we're doing tonight. They have a lot of distance ring styles. I don't like the automatic ones. I like to just know what they're going to be, and I just use the standard 5, 10, and 25 miles. So maybe at 25 miles I'm getting my weather. At 10 miles I'm making my first radio call. At 5 miles, I'm getting ready to enter the traffic pattern, whatever the case is. Track vector, I do like that one as well. Again, I have it turned off here, but that shows you what you're doing across the ground, and it's nice to be able to, you'll have a little blue line that you can compare to the pink line that you're trying to navigate. And if the blue line lines up with the pink line, then you're on course, meaning that whatever heading you're flying in the airplane, you've corrected for the wind and you are paralleling your course line. It will also show you, if you're turning or whatever. I have it set to 5 minutes, so that means that it's going to extend out ahead of the airplane and show a dot where I'm going to be 5 minutes from now. Again, you can do distance, you can do whatever your preference is, but I like the 5 minute vector. If I was flying a faster airplane, I might choose the 2 minute vector. Route labels, I like that on. They got a lot of great options for what kind of airplane you want to look like. So you can go through and pick those out for you. Hazard advisor, that's a Pro Plus feature. And what I have it set to is don't show me hazards unless I'm doing at least 30 knots. So I like to know that I'm airborne. And then hazard altitudes is just going to show you the color coding. So if you're within 100 feet of something, it's going to light up red. If you're at 1,000 feet of something, it's going to light up yellow. And that's the standard for aircraft. If you're flying helicopters, you can see they recommend some different options because you're flying typically a little lower anyway. Let's see. Map touch action. The default setting for that should mostly be no action, and what that's going to do is just seamlessly, join the different charts together. However, sometimes some information can be lost where the seams for the digital charts are, and so by clicking bring to front, then what that does is, like over here we have where the New York chart combines with the Detroit chart. So you can see when I tap over towards our airport, it brought the Detroit chart in front, and if I tap more closer to Oswego there, it'll bring the New York chart to the front. And that's just in case you miss some data. Uh, Another option that you have with the map touch action is bring chart to front with legends. Uh, Probably not necessary for most things, but because what I typically do is, in my documents folder, I downloaded the different legends so I can just go to them in the documents. But anyway, that's an option for you. So it'll just show the chart, as it was printed, and you get all the data on there. Uh, Cockpit sharing is pretty self-explanatory. If you got other devices running ForeFlight, it's going to share the data between the two. If you put a flight plan on one, it will bring it up to the other. Uh, Show annotations on the chart, so you can turn that on, and whatever drawings you put on there will stay on there. Four-color radar. Show you if I should be some radar out there. So that's with the composite radar. So it kind of blends everything together and gives you different shades. So four color just breaks it down to see different intensity levels in a less accurate way. But the thing you want to be careful is though, if you're using ADSB, in-flight weather data once you're airborne, uh, the data that you get there is composite data, and you won't get any radar display if you have the four color thing turned on. So I usually just leave it on the standard radar colors there. Breadcrumbs, that's just a fairly recent feature that they put out there, and it just does what it says. It leaves a little green line on the chart for everywhere that you've already been during your flight. It will stay there, and then once the flight is over, it will clear them off after 15 minutes. I have it set to. You can adjust that for other settings. One of the more recent features too is multiple selections. I really like that option. Without the multiple selections on, then when you want to pull different drop downs, you can see it toggles the sheet off, and you'd have to go back up to the selector there, the layer selector, to pull down different drop downs. So now with multiple selections turned on, you can pick one from each category, except that one allows both, but you can put on multiple selections at one time, and then you just have to tap off of the screen there to get rid of it. So I do like that feature, so you don't have to do a lot of back and forth there. You can just go through, toggle them all, whatever you want on or off quickly. And while I'm here, I can show you those are the instructions from the user content data that I uploaded into ForeFlight, so it shows all that stuff. Pull up the aerial map, get rid of that. So you can see those are all the obstacles that we're working on getting rid of through our airport projects, our obstruction removal projects. A bunch of them on that side as well. Well, that's just the user data. This was kind of neat. Ray with the helicopter had to go do a survey looking for eagles' nests, and so we were able to upload all the search area and search criteria in there, so you can see all the areas that they wanted them to go look at. So anyways, kind of neat. Uh, may not ever use it, but the option's there. So I do like the multiple selections ones. The show control for the map annotations, I do have that on. Because I use the Apple Pencil, I do have it to where if I touch it with the Apple Pencil, it'll automatically start drawing. That's mostly for training. I don't know if I would use that if I didn't. Pencil timeout after 10 seconds of non-use, it will drop out of there. Lock disables buttons. So another problem that you can have, if you have that button selected off, then in the upper right hand corner you have your lock button, your track lock, and that locks you in. Again, it orients the chart in the direction you're flying. You would see your airplane on there ahead of you. But the problem is, especially if it's bumpy out, is if you bump that, the screen there, it will, or if you bump one of the different buttons down there at the bottom, once you get it locked in there, it'll mess up the lock feature. Oh, that's for the, I'm sorry, that's for the plates and documents view. There's a similar one for the lock feature. Sorry, that's on the plates button. So if you got a instrument approach plate up, then the lock disables the buttons, because the last thing you want to have happen on a instrument approach is to lose access to your approach chart by accidentally tapping a button. So that's what that one is. Sorry about that. Now that ADS-B is in effect, a lot more people are going to be popping up on your, a lot more traffic is going to be popping up on your iPad. And so I have high distant traffic off. If you want to know just how many planes are around you, you can turn that button off. But I don't need to know about the, Airbus at 36,000 feet. If you have that turned off, it's going to show everybody around you. So by having hiding distant traffic, it'll just show the traffic in your immediate airspace, altitude and distance away. Search and rescue features, unless you're doing that, you're going to leave that off. Automatic downloads, again, another feature that when the app is open, it will just automatically start downloading and updating stuff for you. So I have that turned on. That's kind of nice. The pack button, enable auto check. That's the one that's going to check to make sure that you have all the documents on board for your planned flight. And we'll pull up a warning if you don't. Track logs. I do like to track my flights. You got the enable start stop control, so that's just telling you, that the button, the record button in the bottom left is there. Removing that button would get rid of that. I kind of use that record button as kind of like a stopwatch as well. So I'll usually hit the record button right before I get ready to take off. It's kind of like my time off timer. Enable auto start stop. So once it recognizes that you're moving at a good enough speed, it will automatically start generating a track log for you. Briefing, I have it as graphical, and we're going to translate all the classic briefings into something a little fancier. We'll look at those. Auto show taxi. So what that does is when you land, once it recognizes that you're on the ground, if there's a taxi chart available for the airport, it will pop it up on your iPad, and if it with it being geo-referenced and still show you where you are on the taxi chart. So I like that one on there. The show taxi on map, that would pop it up right onto your chart. It makes it really small and you have to super zoom in to see it. But that's available too. I don't use that feature. On the alerts, just turn them all on. Units and time, all the basic stuff there. Allow the device to sleep. You want to make sure that's turned off. So the app doesn't shut down on you in flight. Automatic clock check. Yeah, that was pretty obvious. Enable own ship. So right now I have that turned off, so you don't know my secret location. But usually I'll have that set to always. One of the features that, if you're, taking a check ride, like your instrument check ride, I know the pilot examiner likes to have you turn off the enable own ship feature so that you have to use your head for a little bit of that navigation instead of looking at the little airplane there. Show airports, show private airports. I have that clicked off. I mean, if there was a private airport I was trying to go to, I mean, you can still see them on the chart, but I just have that clicked off. Start on last screen, so that one's good. Synchronizes, yeah, all that good stuff. So those are all the basic settings for the app. Some of the map options, they're really trying to sell this aeronautical view there. I don't know, maybe I'm starting to show my age, but I'm not a huge fan of that. Some nice features of it though are that it, you can see for your military operations area, it shows you the altitudes right on there, for your different airspaces. You can see it shows you the altitude for the shelf there. Just shows little things. It shows all your intersections on there, all the stuff that would be on your chart. I think what they're going for is they see a world where we're flying like this, I guess. Personally, I don't think we're quite there yet. I like to have the sectional chart overlay, and the more you zoom in, the more data is going to show. So, some of the latest things, they're popping up highways that are labeled. You can see roads, railroad tracks, general town dimensions, and you can see all the blue stuff right over here. And so you can toggle some of that stuff off if if it's more than you want to look at. So there, I just got rid of all the Victor Airways. This one here is for the Air Route Traffic Control Center boundaries, which could be useful, and if you needed a radio frequency, you didn't know who to talk to in a particular area, you can pop that up, click on it, or you can see it listed right there, but you can click it up and give you some frequencies that you could use. That's the aeronautical chart data. You get your street map and aerial map. This stuff is not stored on the iPad, so this would just be for pre-flight. Gee, if I had that aeronautical thing up, I can find our airport. Oh, there it is. You see how if you had the other one set to show taxi chart on the map versus pulling up an actual taxi chart, this is what you would see. It's not bad at Rochester though. It does have all the taxiway diagrams labeled. It would show you where you were and all that stuff. So play around with it, see which one you like best. Another nice thing about the data here, having it all just readily accessible to you, is that uh, the white box is there for your terminal area charts, which are a higher scale map for that particular area. And on ForeFlight, then when you zoom in, and most of the electronic flight apps that are out there, when you zoom in now, you can automatically get that uh, terminal area chart. So it's just a more detailed version of the sectional chart. Above the record button, you can see the pencil thing there. So now you can draw on your map, and once you turn it off, they will stay there. And they'll stay there until you delete them. So if you want to delete them, just hit the clear button, and that'll get rid of them. You got different options there for inputting drawings on there. Up along the top, we're going to go over the flight plan drop down here in a little bit. First, I'll go over the settings. So the first one here is screen brightness. So you can set the screen brightness for your device quickly instead of having to go to the iPad settings. Screen brightness, is the biggest killer to your iPad battery. So if battery is an option, you want to keep that down to the lowest level that you can stand. They got invert charts, so maybe if you're flying at night, you'd like to look at things like that. I don't know. Not my cup of tea, but there you go. Map theme, I got set to dark mode terrain. You got some different options for the terrain. Place labels, so you can see right now it's showing, things like Canandaigua Lake and those things. So if we turn off the place labels, those should disappear. So, and all the different cultural elements that will pop up on the aeronautical chart or aeronautical data chart. Here you can quickly change the center mode. So, let's say that you've been flying in track up, but you'd like to be able to look at it north up. One, you could just turn the track up off, and it'll bring it back to north. But the other option then would be to, if you wanted to continue tracking your flight in the north up, you just hit the north up button, and that switches it there too. You can also change it, in the upper right hand corner you see the little north symbol. So when you're in the lock mode, you can tab that button, and that will toggle you from track up to north up there. Quick. Route label, so here I can put on my distance rings. Glide advisors, again, another fairly recent feature, probably within the last year or so. If you put in your approximate glide ratio, then it's a dynamic advisor that, based on your ground speed, it will estimate how far you can glide based on your altitude. So it actually changes and expands. It follows and adjusts the shape for the terrain around you. So it's pretty neat little feature. I typically do have that turned on when I'm flying. If you have it connected to an ADS-B in option, either through Stratus or a transponder that does it inside the aircraft, then it will actually adjust itself for the forecast winds as well. So that's a pretty neat feature. And you got the track vector, breadcrumbs, all that stuff typically you have turned on. You can get to the map touch action. So those are just some quick toggles there if you wanted to, temporarily change some of your settings. Next option is the attitude reference sheet here. So if you have the basic plan, then all you're going to see is blue over pink. If it's not connected to a Stratus or some other information source that's giving you attitude, heading, reference data, then in flight it will continue to hold or show you your track. It'll show you your GPS altitude. It'll show you your knots, but it's not going to show you any picture bank data. Because we have I got the Pro Plus plan. Everything's in red because it knows I'm within 100 feet of the ground. Another thing you can do on the Pro Plus plan is it'll actually show relative position of aircraft above or below you using ADS-B data. And if your map shows that there's a plane around you, you can actually click and drag it and go look for it, I guess. And then if you let go, you can see a little timer pops up that will auto return it back to forward for you. Different things that are going to show up on that. Runways are going to show up, and other basic terrain features. So, pretty neat little feature. There is some adjustments. Particularly if you're, sometimes your attitude heading reference system, once it starts up, it may not show up correctly, pitched and banked. So in the bottom left there's a settings tab. Well, hang on. Where's the... it's not, because there's no attitude information. Normally there'd be a box there that allows you to adjust it and reset it to center. The next option you have there is, the little speedometer looking symbol on the top there. It's going to pull up your lower dashboard, which is going to give you a bunch of information. Now you can set them about however you want. On the sheet that I gave you a link to, I put the ones that I like to have up there. I think you lose one of them if you turn it sideways. But I have, my track, course to next. That's, if you're using VOR, that's going to be your omni-bearing selector setting, so I like to have that available. I got my time, speed, and distance. I do try to keep that accuracy thing up there just as a double check to know that I'm getting good source data for it. And in flight, I don't like to have to add 4 if I don't have to, so having the Zulu time up there is handy. But you can change any of those. Just tap on the one that you want to change, and it will put up give you a bunch of options for whatever you want down there in your dashboard. This is just showing you some favorites that I've created, and that will just show you the recent, so you can pre-populate a plan really quick. In the search bar at the top, it gives you you're supposed to be able to search things in a lot of different ways. So if we type in just a town name now, used to be you had to use the airport identifier, but maybe you don't know the airport identifier. So if you start typing the airport name or the town, then it will also search in that general area. See if there's one in there that you want. You can see it's showing both airports and navigation and recent searches, all that stuff in there. A lot of different things you can do with the search tab. So creating a basic flight plan. First thing you got to do is know where you want to go, I suppose. Uh, let's say that you're taking a longer trip. Now, as far as inputting data, you can either start typing up here and just type out the airport information, whatever nav data you want in there. If you press on it and pull, that'll drag it out of there. You can also tap on the map and find what you want, and just, so if I select KSDC and just tap that, that's going to put that up in the flight plan for me. If you tap on the symbol up in there in the flight plan window, you can delete it, tell it to, I'm here and I want to go direct to there. So if I click direct to, it will draw a line from wherever I'm at right to the station. Show it on the map, so it'll zoom in to where that is, and you can see pull up the airport data. For IFR flying, one of the features that I like, you see it gives you a lot of options here. You can quickly grab NOTAMs, you can select what runway you want to use, set your altitude and speed, a lot of different things that you could put in there. But for IFR flying, I like the show plate feature so that you don't have to hunt for your instrument approach plates. So you can tap on that, find the instrument approach that you want, and quickly put it on the chart there for you. So just having that stuff up in the flight plan is kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of useful data that you may need while you're in flight. Let's say that we were heading down to there today. So we're heading down to someplace in Virginia. Now you can see up in the flight plan thing that just based on that, it already populated some data there. So I have the airplane picked out that I want. The next box down is the performance profile. I have the profile that I want to use, and I have my default altitude was popped up in there. Now you can see here that it's already telling us our distance. Right now 4 hours and 6 minutes to get there. 36.5 gallons of fuel, and man, if we top the plane off, we could probably do that in one shot if we want to. And it's saying we're dealing with a 14 knot headwind. Now, if you have changes to your route, what it's putting is the total wind along the route. So you can see if we go there and come back, we're still dealing with a 4 knot headwind. Headwinds always hurt more than tailwinds help. But if you had a destination that was maybe farther than you expect to be able to go, a lot of times just in the pre-planning phase, I'll pop it in there. And what you can do is just use 2 fingers at the same time and press on the chart, and that pops up a little ruler. And what that ruler you can see is showing you, the distance that I have lined up there, the course, but the time. So that's 2 hours and 18 minutes to get there. So, just looking at that, if I knew I only wanted to be in the air for, say, 3 hours, then I can see how far down I would get at the 3 hour mark, and start looking for an airport near there that I want to plan my flight to. So that little ruler feature comes in pretty handy. Now once we have that, again, if we want to get rid of that other one, I can drag it out of there, or I can delete it by hand. So now planning our first leg of the flight. I usually start by popping in a straight line, Uh, After the straight line, I want to check some basic weather along my route. So that's where I'm going to pull down pop up some drop downs here. So I'm going to look at the radar. I'm going to look my airmets, sigmets, center weather advisories, my temporary flight restrictions, flight category, PIREPS, lightning. Those are all the ones that I usually will initially click to just kind of get an initial sense for what kind of weather I have along my route. Now you can see, right from our destination, we already got some problems. It doesn't look like we're going to be heading out on this flight anytime soon, but I put the flight category button in there, and that's showing you all the different stations that are reporting weather data to the national system. Now, keep in mind, not all weather stations do report to the national system. Typically, any airport that has a ASOS, those are government owned and operated, so they're going to report to the national system. But if the airport has a AWAS, then they may not be. Here at Williamson Flying Club, we pay a per quarter fee to upload our data to the national system. And so if I move that over, you can see that we do have our little pink dot over the over our airport there, so that you can get our weather data now, online through ForeFlight, as well as through ADSB in flight if you're connected to that. All the flight categories are color coded, so green is going to be basic VFR, so that's better than 3,000 foot ceilings and 5 miles visibility. Blue is going to be marginal VFR, so that's, could be the ceiling somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000, or visibility between 3 and 5 miles. Red is IFR, so that's a ceiling and or visibility below 1,000 foot ceilings and or below 3 miles. And pink is low IFR, so that means less than a 500 foot ceiling or less than a mile visibility. So you can quickly get a sense for what's going on there along your route. Knowing where the weather is going to be, that might cause you to divert. Everyone wants to pick the shortest route possible, but keep in mind a lot of times, planning your flight, a slight diversion around some weather area doesn't really add a whole lot. For example, right now our estimated time of route would be 3 hours and 20 minutes. If I just, let's say that we wanted to deviate up north along, from Buffalo and on down there to get out of some weather, I could either, to put in extra waypoints, you can tap the waypoint and you can see one of the options is to insert before or insert after, and then you can type it in there. I personally like to just use the rubber banding technique. So just put your finger on the pink line and drag it close to where you want. So, like maybe the Buffalo VOR. So if I pop that up in there, there's the Buffalo VOR there. And let's say I want to come up past the Erie VOR. And see what navs are close by there. So just altering my plan like that, only added 7 minutes to my flight. But it would keep me out of a whole lot of trouble. You can see all the color coding for the different flight advisories. I want to take off the radar so you can see them a little better. Now, for the different flight advisories, you just have to tap where the flight advisories are, and it's going to pull a list of all the different flight advisories under where you tapped your fingers. So if I tap up by our airport, you can see that it's telling me that, Currently there's a flight advisory for IFR, low level turbulence, icing above 8,000 feet, and high level turbulence. And then you can click each of those and get the textual description. Uh, you know, big part to pay attention to on the textual description is I like, going down to the bottom there where it says conditions continuing through 0900 Zulu. So that's going to be there a little while because you can see the flight advisories. AirMets come out at scheduled times and they update as the conditions are continue to exist. But like this one expires at 11 p.m. And so what that's saying is that even though this one expires at 11 p.m., it's going to be replaced with another one, most likely that they expect to last through 0900 Zulu, so through 5 in the morning. You can see the red over here. That's for your. Well, it looks like they're showing severe turbulence from the surface up to 5,000. That's what the red one is in there for in this area. The pink is for your mountain obscuration. Blue is for icing. The orange is for your moderate turbulence. And the purple is for IFR. So a lot of flight advisories along our route. If I get rid of the flight advisories, then you can see it also shows in red all the temporary flight restrictions. So we know about the one in the DC metropolitan area, but you'll be able to quickly see if there's any other ones along your route. You can see there's a little temporary flight restriction right there. And with them popped up there, you can tap on them, and it will give you the data for the flight restriction. So, the surface to 2400 gives you all the reasons that it's there and all the different specific restrictions. So, great to be able to graphically see temporary flight restrictions where they are on the chart so you can make sure that you avoid them. Keep in mind that most pilots that violated temporary flight restriction knew where it was ahead of time, so make sure you give yourself a wide berth if you're planning around those. So we'll toggle that one off. Next, again, you got the flight categories. And besides flight category, again, you got all these other options that you can populate. So if you just want to know what the surface wind barbs are going to look like, the winds aloft, you can see that when I clicked on that, it pulled a little slider up in the bottom right, so you can select a particular altitude and see what the winds are at a particular altitude. See them moving around there, get pretty strong as we get up higher there. So winds aloft, temperature dew point spread. We know the closer the temperature dew point is together, the more likely we're going to have low clouds, precipitation, mist, whatever. So that show, all the orange is bad, green is not as bad. Let's see. Temperature, visibilities, specific ceilings along the route to kind of help you when you're going to be picking that altitude that you want to fly. Sky coverage, broken, overcast, whatever the case is there. For that matter, you can look at up at the top, you can click on the enhanced satellite view. And they got the color satellite view, which is going to highlight denser areas of clouds and precipitation. The PIREPs are great. I wish people did more of them. There's nothing better than having some real in-flight weather data along your route. So you can see on the chart there all the different PIREPs that have popped up. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot along our route, but if you see one that you want to look at, you just tap on it and it will tell you what it was all about, decode it for you. So no icing at 5,000, light rain, IMC conditions, B58, so that'd be a barren, I believe. So PIREPs are handy and useful. I like to use those. Lightning detector. So definitely help you find those areas of thunderstorms. When you're looking at the radar, you can see those little, they kind of resize themselves as I zoom in, but those are areas where they're detecting circulation. If you look at the center of the chart, so some rotation there, so that tells you that's a really intense shower, possibly thunderstorm there. And you'll see those little gray lines coming off of them with the little dots. Each one of those dots represents 10 minutes, and that's the projected movement of that particular cell over the next 30 minutes. If I hit the play button here, you can see that it kind of repopulates those and changes them along the way. So they're just kind of a best guess. Besides just using the play button or the loop there, you can drag the little blue dot there once you have them loaded in, the little slider back and forth to look and see what the trends were. If you got the Pro Plus plan, then you're going to see icing drop down, which is a nice tool. There's also an option now that you can have it to where it will automatically select the altitude based on your ADSB altitude along your route. So it'll update that for you to keep you advised of any potential icing conditions. But here that's potential icing along our route at 7,000 feet. You can see there's still a little potential icing down there at 5,000 feet. And at 3,000 and 4,000 feet it looks okay. So that tells us that the freezing level must be between 4,000 and 5,000 feet. Most likely along that route. Also got a turbulence drop down. You can do the same thing to get turbulence intensities at different altitudes. Keep in mind this is all forecast. But if you're planning that long flight, one thing might be the old fuel prices there. So it color codes those for you. Most of the time those fuel prices represent if they have full service, the full service price. So, you may have to look into it a little deeper. There might be some self-serve prices that are a little lower. Those are all the basic drop downs that you can play around with to help you determine your route of flight. So looking at weather and other data there. Once we have that weather data or our route data in there, then it'd be a good time to review the departure and arrival information. So you can get that by tapping on the box there. Now, if I had it clicked on to show weather first, then when I pulled that up, it would automatically went to the METAR page down at the bottom. But because I have that toggled off, then it pulls up the airport data so that I can quickly get airport frequencies and other data for the airport. You can see there's a taxi diagram. We don't have an official one for our airport, so this is a ForeFlight generated one. And you can see at the top there, it does have 2 notices to airmen right away there, telling us about the taxiway closures and the construction that we have going on here. But you get a lot of your basic airport data there. You can see just in the upper part there, it gives us the traffic pattern altitude. The bottom we got the weather frequencies, the common traffic frequencies. Scrolling down, we can get the all the remarks. That nobody's populated for 3 years. That's all right. Nearby airports, runway. So when I no, I was gonna say, well, if there's wind right now, it said the winds were calm, but if I pull up Rochester, then under the uh, runway section, you see it's actually showing you based on the last METAR data that it received what the best runways were and what your crosswind and headwind components would be on the different runways, and basic traffic pattern data for each of the different runways there. Uh, another thing that you could do is click the full screen button, and that's going to pull it up to the main page here where you can find all of the weather data. Another handy feature when you go to the runways is going to show them all there. All the same data that we can get there is just kind of blown up and easier to get through. All the notices to airmen here. But you can click on the FBOs tab, which will tell you about, if there's, especially if there's multiple FBOs, you can click on that, a lot of good information there. If there's any fees, comments, contact information. Now they got my name spelled right. That's kind of nice. But that's a nice tab. Keep in mind that the chart supplement, which they still call the facilities directory here, now the chart supplement, may tell you about if fuel is available at an airport, but they're not allowed to advertise for anybody, so it doesn't tell you about any specific FBO data. Keep in mind if you know what FBO you're going to, you can call ahead of time, arrange ground transportation. Sometimes they have deals, with the different rental car companies, deals with local hotels. That can help you out. So in that FBO data, it's going to show you nearby restaurants, how far they taxi, all that good stuff, found right in the FBO tab. And if we go down to our destination airport here, good old Morgan County, again, we can, if we get the details for there, we can get all that, all the same stuff. So you get all your airport details right away. Cool feature that you can do that a lot of people aren't aware of is going down to your destination airport. Once you know what runway you want to use there, if you click on the procedure button, you can see there's traffic pattern, and then it will show you the different runways. So let's say we want to land on runway 30, and it gives you some options there. So and some recommended options. So the primary option that we typically do is the cross midfield and teardrop. So it will show you where that is. You click add to route, and now that's going to be saved on there as part of your route planning. You can see it popped up in the flight plan screen. So that's a handy little feature, especially when you're going to unfamiliar airports. As far as altitude goes, we want to select an altitude for our flight based on, terrain, which we can scan for along the chart, what our reported ceilings were. So getting the weather data, the ceiling data would help out with that. On the flight plan, when you click the tab there, it'll show you a bunch of different altitudes. It does generally correct them for, if you're above 3,000 feet AGL along your route, then it's going to start showing them based on the east-west cruising altitude. So you can see once it gets above 3,500, then it starts using 4,500, 6,500, 8,500. But you can also see it's showing you, different headwinds or tailwinds that you might experience at the different altitudes, estimated time en route, and fuel. So keep in mind, a lot of times climbing to a higher altitude may shave a... Oh, okay, I got a nasty message there that said it disconnected and reconnected. So there you go. Heading that pops up there is your magnetic heading. In this case, because so it's factoring in variation there. If you're getting the Pro Plus plan, you can click on the profile view, and it will show your route of flight above the different terrain and airspaces along your route. So you can see by picking 6,500, that would actually get us above all the controlled airspace along the route and well above the terrain. If you did pick an altitude that would cause you to hit something, I don't know, it's pretty low flight. Let's see if that, there you go. So it shows you where your first strike is, and you can see that most of the time it has this yellow within 1,000 feet of the ground, and then it shows us 243 nautical miles down the road is where we're going to hit our first thing. So we'll go back to a more reasonable altitude. At the bottom there, you also got the suitcase button. So when you click that, it's going to pop up all the charts that you're going to need. And all you got to do is hit the pack button at the bottom, and it will download those onto your iPad to make sure you have everything you need. You got the star to favorite it. The bottom right-hand button is where we're going to send it to pre-flight weather brief. We'll do that in a second. If you know you're going to be departing sometime in the future, so let's say I don't want to leave till tomorrow morning, I can put that in there. And now it's going to change all our flight plan data based on the forecast conditions at 8:30 a.m. in the morning. So now it has us with a 6-knot tailwind, 3 hours to get down there, and an arrival time if we left at 8:30 of 11:30, a little less fuel. So always make sure you put your departure time in there to make sure you get the most accurate data. The routes, these are pre-selected routes, probably most commonly used for IFR traffic or IFR flying. I don't use this feature too much for VFR stuff, but it might be worth looking at, but mostly for IFR stuff. For the trip back, you can click the reverse button and we'll just switch everything around. On the flight, once you have your flight plan in there, the pink line is the one that you're going to be following. The blue line is what's up next, and if you tap on the course line, it will show you the magnetic course and distance for that particular leg, and some options to, fly that leg or go direct to and skip a waypoint. You can do that with any of these. If you decide to skip Buffalo, you can just tap it and hit direct to, and that'll change your course line for you. So while you're in flight. Oh, use the VOR. But you want to scan through all the different airspaces along your route. Keep in mind, good idea to consider using, VORs if possible on those longer trips, even though you may be using GPS or your iPad, just in case something happens and you lose some kind, just kind of a backup navigation plan. But you need to note that, pay particular attention to NOTAMs to make sure that the VOR that you picked is still in service. They're going to be removing a bunch of them over the next several years. So once we have our basic flight plan in there, we picked our dream altitude. Again, we can still change that. Then all we got to do is click the bottom right-hand button there, and we're going to send it to flights. And you can see I got a bunch of warnings there. All having to do with the weight and balance data, which I must have something errored in there wrong. But anyway, once you have your flight, again, you can edit into the data there. It shows you a brief overview of what you're doing. You can pick the FBO that you plan on going to when you get down there, just so that that data is readily available to you. Again, pack for the flight, copy, delete. What we're going to want to do once we get that in there, though, is click on the briefing button. Now, before I go to the briefing button, you can see that there's a navlog button here, and if I tap on that, it generates a navlog that you could either send it to you by email. You can print it if you want a copy of your plan, a hard copy on something else. But we're going to click on the briefing tab. So once we have our route and altitude done, we'll click on the briefing and let it pull down that data. It's going to take a second. There's a lot of weather along that route. Now it follows a briefing format, similar to what you would get if you called in. It starts with the big weather picture where your highs and lows and fronts and all that stuff are. So it starts with a surface analysis chart. Now in the upper left-hand corner, you got the three little lines there. You can tap on those to fast forward to some of these different items there if you wanted to. Whoa, let me get back to my briefing. Ding. And once you download the briefing, it's saved on the iPad, so if you have to get that data later on, you would just go to the Flights tab and pull up the latest briefing. You can also have it set to email the briefing to you and some other things. If there's a chart like the surface analysis chart, you can tap on the chart itself and it will pull up a bigger chart so you can zoom in and look around. So looks like we got about the worst conditions we can get. We got a warm front, cold front, occluded front, and a trough all in one. So good times. Next page down at the bottom left here is the METARS tab, so we'll click on that. And so you can see it gives us an overview of the different METAR data along our route within a corridor along our route. We can see once we get past Buffalo, things start to improve a little bit, although they're still pretty marginal along the route. Down here we got all the textual briefing, or all the textual descriptions of the different METARs along there, so you can get all that. If you see, I prefer in the encoded. Once you know the codes, you can read through it faster. But if you see an abbreviation you don't know or like, in the upper right, you can click on plain text, and it will decode all that stuff for you. Can you read through it that way? Next page after the METARs is different PIREPs. So it shows that there's only one PIREP along there near our destination, and it gives you the information for that. So just light rime icing between 8,000 and 6,000 feet. Next is going to be cloud coverage along our route. So in the upper left-hand corner, it gives you, different charts there. East, we would be up here in the northeast, our airport. And again, if there's a chart there, you can tap on the chart and it will pull it up so you can zoom in and read what you got going on. Important thing for, especially IFR pilots, but this chart here, is showing you areas of broken and overcast clouds, and it gives you the cloud forecast cloud tops as well. So if there was a chance of getting on top of those clouds, you get that data here. So you'd have to just look through each of the different charts along the route there. And then you can see it shows different times. So you got the 1200 Zulu, which would be the 8 in the morning, and then we got the 11 in the morning. What's going to happen there? After cloud coverage, we have another chart here that's going to show us winds and temperatures. Again, because we told we're leaving at, I changed it to where we're leaving at 8:30 in the morning. You can see that, probably not going to happen because we got a lot of 1 to 3 mile visibility along our route, some showery precipitation. Winds are going to be fairly light, looking like about 5 knots out of the east. But the weather conditions, at least at 8 in the morning, aren't looking too promising. If we pull up 1500, looks like maybe there'd be a chance for making that flight a little later in the day. Next is going to be the terminal forecast. So this is based on our estimated time of departure. So you can see it highlights the portion of the terminal forecast based on, we told we wanted to leave it at 8:30 in the morning. So that line that it shows there is saying from 0 to 800. So from 4 in the morning, it's calling for 220 at 4, 3 miles visibility, mist, overcast at 900, with conditions improving at 1400, a little bit to marginal VFR. It's still not that great. But it pulls down the TAF line relative to your passing time along your route. So if we departed at 8:30, then along our route, those are the terminal forecast lines that would be valid for the time period that we're going to be passing through that area. So it doesn't look like we're getting any better than marginal conditions at our forecast departure time. And it looks like those conditions are supposed to stay like that all day. Next would be the wind chart. So, yeah, just showing the wind barbs along our route at the altitude that we picked there. This is for 6,000 feet, flight level 60. So you can see that mostly tailwind. Once we get past Buffalo, we'd be dealing with a tailwind. So that's another thing too. You can see here, if we had gone a straight line, we would have had mostly light headwinds along the way. So by altering our path a little bit, it might have actually made for a slightly faster trip based on the forecast winds at that altitude. Next we got vertical cross section. So this chart's a little busy and takes some getting used to. But you can see it's showing our top of climb, the winds at our altitude, what they are above and below us. You can see that it's showing that there's a potential for icing conditions at our planned altitude. But you're using this chart, you can see that if we chose a lower altitude, like maybe 4,500, we'd still be okay with the terrain, but we wouldn't have to deal with any of the icing conditions. Again, it's not going to matter for this planned flight because the clouds and visibility are too low. But that's another pretty useful chart there. The top line there is your tropopause. Winds aloft table. So the highlighted one is the altitude base, the closest winds aloft to the altitude that we picked, 6,500. And then it gives you some other altitudes and temperatures along your route there. Destination NOTAMs. This one I do like to hit the plain text button on. Notice as the airman, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation on those abbreviations, so I do like to look through the no assist to airmen using the decoded button. En route navigation NOTAMs. So it looks like a couple of NDBs out of service. Communications is showing a lot of remote communications outlets. So if you're trying to get a hold of flight service, there's a bunch of those that are have been created or out of service. It looks like they're all out of service. Yeah, okay. Looks like Perry Warsaw got a automated weather station now. So that's been commissioned. That's good news. And here you can see along Perry Warsaw on the second line you got the parachute jumping. So just airspace nodes along the way, en route. Now this one pulls up, you know, I don't know that I would be going through this one, but it's available to you. It's going to be saved on your iPad. So if you maybe had to divert to another airport, this gives you some airports along your route, you know, so you can double check, especially if you didn't have ADS-B data. If you have ADS-B in the airplane, you know, that's going to update your NOTAMs in flight as well. That's one of the pieces of information that you get. But if you didn't have that, this would be the next best thing, being able to look through and see if the airport that you're trying to go to is closed or whatever else is going on. And that's usually as far as I look in the briefing. Now, if we go to the imagery tab, you know, there's just a whole bunch of different options that you can use to help with your flight planning. Lots of different charts, lots of different probabilities. So along with the icing probabilities, another good one is icing severities. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Reverse that. They're usually giving you the icing severity. This one gives us icing probabilities, so percentage chances at different altitudes. So 00 Zulu on Friday, you can see there's a pretty darn good chance that you're going to get icing somewhere along there. That's the max, and then you can click it by altitude. I'm not going to go through all these, but there's a lot of good charts that you can peek through. What was one that I liked here? I don't even think they have them anymore. Yeah, I don't really go through those too often. Now, once we, excuse me, once we've finished with our briefing, if I go back to flights, but once you've finished looking through your briefing and you got everything set the way you want it, you can go down to the bottom here, and if you desire, you can click on proceed to file. So you got the VFR flight plan. You can see it's preloaded all the data in there for you. Now you can file and activate your VFR flight plans on ForeFlight so long as you have access to the internet. You can file and activate them on ForeFlight and also close them on the other end. So that's pretty nice. They, you know, I feel like a lot of people, especially in the past, didn't file and activate flight plans because it was kind of a pain in the butt. You know, you had to call somebody in the air to activate it, or call them on the phone, or whatever. But through ForeFlight and even 1-800-WX brief, they've made a lot of really easy ways to activate and close VFR flight plans. And keep in mind that gives us that, what am I trying to say? Search and rescue option, right? So if you don't file a flight plan and nobody knows to come looking for you. They're not going to. Uh, Once one of the things I forgot to go over is once you figure out your altitude that you want to use, your pressure and temperature. Uh, One of the things you might want to alter is your true airspeed. Now, once you calculate your true airspeed, uh, if it's different than what your flight plan was, all you have to do is just at the end of the line in your flight plan, just type it in there. So if because I'm at 6,500, I found my true airspeed to be 110, just type in 110 KTS and hit space, and now it's going to base your flight plan on that true airspeed that I just put in there. Other stuff that you could put in there is, if you're going to be flying at a lower power setting and you want to, quickly change the fuel burn, you can type that in there too. Just whatever it is, and then just put GPH. And again, it will recalculate your flight plan based on that data. But to summarize, when you're planning a flight, like I said, start with a straight line. See why you might want to not go in a straight line, either availability of nav checkpoints, weather, airspace, winds and temperatures aloft. Develop your route, figure out your altitude, and then get a briefing. I spent about, hour and 50 minutes talking about ForeFlight, but in the grand scheme of things, I could probably comfortably plan the flight that we were just talking about in about 10 minutes, once you have all the data input in there. And I got to tell you, especially when you're taking longer trips, having some kind of ADS-B in there, weather data available to you in the cockpit has really changed, the way we have to and are able to plan and execute flights. Before just using internet or phone on the ground, there's just so many flights that end up, you're able to go now where before you wouldn't have been able to, because you don't have updated data, and because you do have updated data, allows you to, alter your flight plan, which, you could do at any point along your flight. You can, adjust your flight plan while en route, make a completely new route if you wanted to. Do I have any specific questions or anything you'd like me to go over about ForeFlight? Big thing is just to develop a routine so that, like I said, that sheet that I gave you should kind of get you to follow through a routine. One of the things that I didn't show is that if you go to the, if there's documents that you want, like in the documents folders, I have, all the club checklists and all the, stuff that I want there. I have manuals for airplanes and equipment that I fly. You can even, I got legends. There's so much data that you can store in the documents and have all that stuff available to you in flight. It's a really neat feature. And so if you want to download something, you can create a binder, add a new binder or whatever. And if that binder is open and the one that you want, then if you go to like our club website, for instance, go to the aircraft tab, click on checklist, and up here at the top, you can have a send it to option, and you just find ForeFlight on there, hit copy to, and it's going to put that, well, I guess it's going to put it right in the documents folder. So it's going to put that in there, and now it's saved for your use. So any questions? On another note, I was reading their putting out a special FAR for the, to loosen up some restrictions on flight reviews that are out of date, but don't get your hopes up too much. From what I've looked through, it's only going to apply to pilots needing to do certain operations, but if for certain operations, if your flight review expired after March 1st, it looks like they're going to extend them to the end of June if you meet certain requirements and accomplish certain tasks. There may be some changes to that, but that's just something coming down the road there. I don't think it's official quite yet. But if I don't have any questions, then hopefully you guys are ready to go use some ForeFlight. You want to play around with it on the ground and get as much done on the ground. In flight is not the time to try to figure things out. So do as much as you can. You can file flight plans all day long. As long as you don't activate them, they just get deleted from the system. But once you activate a flight plan, you do need to make sure you close it out. But you're right. There's no problem to file if you don't fly, as long as you didn't activate it. Any other questions? All right. Well, I thank you guys for joining me tonight. I'll try to have some more topics. If there's anything specifically you want me to go over, send me an email, and hopefully we'll be back at it sooner than later. So thank you guys. Have a good night.